As the Mariners creep ever closer to their first playoff berth in the last 2 decades, September baseball is right around the corner. And you know what? September call-ups are going to be looking a little bit different this year, as teams can only add up to 28 players instead of 40. Obviously, with the 26-man expanded rosters that we have this day and age, it means that we're only going to be able to add 2 players to the Mariners roster. And the question is, what 2 players can the Mariners add? In the old days, you would see everything from single A pitchers you've never heard of to some of the team's top prospects, but now as teams vie for the postseason, it's going to need to be a little more selective. And we have a list of 8 players that the Mariners could add to their Major League roster in the next couple of days that could help impact the playoffs and the race for the American League Championship. We're going to go ahead and split this up into 3 different sections, from the least likely to it's possible to the most likely players to be added to the Seattle Mariners here in the next couple of days. Starting off in the least likely category, we have Mariners top pitching prospect Emerson Hancock. Now, there are a few different reasons why Hancock probably won't be added to the Mariners roster come September, but the 23-year-old has a 3.03 ERA. Down in AA Arkansas, he has 69 strikeouts, nice, to only 23 walks. He has a whip of 1.103, which, I mean, not great, but not the worst. He's striking out 8.4 per 9 with a 2.8 per 9 walk rate. With a nice steady 3 strikeouts to walk ratio, you can't help but believe that Emerson Hancock is on his way to being a workhorse for the Seattle Mariners. I mean, who can forget how he looked in the Future Stars game that was held right before we had the All-Star game inside of Dodger Stadium, when he struck out the side against some of the best prospects in the National League. However, the biggest problem and hindrance for Emerson Hancock, other than the fact that he has not pitched above AA, is that he unfortunately is not yet on the 40-man roster, meaning that if he was to make it onto the team, the Mariners would have to cut somebody from their 40-man roster to add Hancock to it, and then bring him up to the major leagues. In years past, the Mariners would have probably done this as getting players into some sort of situations where maybe they can, kind of see what a playoff hunt looks like and what a race looks like. This isn't one of those years. This is a year where the Mariners need to be going for it, and that just means that Hancock, while he will be good here in the next couple of years, there's just a good chance he's not going to make it. Next on our list of least likely to make it in the September call-ups is pitcher Justus Sheffield. Now, Sheffield is just 26 years old and came over in the James Paxton deal with the New York Yankees a couple years back. But man, is he really struggling down in AAA. Now, I'll be the first to tell you that AAA is a hitter's haven, and Justus Sheffield just really is not cut out for a ballpark like that and a league like the PCL where everybody's hitting tanks. Sheffield is still on the 40-man roster, and he did pitch for the Mariners earlier this year when he pitched in 5 games with Seattle, 6.2 innings, and he had a 3.12 FIP with a 0 ERA, 3 strikeouts. He really didn't play that much before he was sent back down to the minor leagues, and in AAA, these numbers are just awful. He has a 7.3 ERA with a whip of 1.784. He's allowing 12.4 hits per 9, 1.8 home runs per 9. He is striking out 8 hitters per 9 innings, but only has a 2.2 strikeout to walk ratio in Tacoma. With the Mariners this year, he was pitching out of the bullpen. However, back down in Tacoma, he is once again starting. It almost is like he doesn't know what the Mariners want from him, whether they want him to start, whether they want him to pitch out of the bullpen. I think that if they just keep him in the starting role and just see what he can do, that's going to be the best case scenario for him, but he does not need to see a major league mound the rest of this year. Moving on over to the maybe it could happen is Abraham Toro. The second base and third baseman who can also play a bit of outfield is just 25, almost 26 years old, and has been hitting okay down at AAA, but not enough to really force the Mariners' hand. In fact, to tell you all about it, let me turn you over to my friend Joe.
Now, every September call-up, you got to have a positional player come in from the minors and be a spark plug for your offense. Got 3 players I want to showcase who I think are the front runners, with one having a pretty significant lead. We're going to start with Abraham Toro in Tacoma the last 30 days. Toro's played 14 games and 51 at-bats, and he's hitting 255, it's Abraham Toro. He's got 2 home runs, he's sneaky power, sneaky contact, but he's very, in my head, pretty clutch player. Abraham Toro could play all over the field, and especially when you got Haggerty, who seems to be banged up. You got question marks around Ty France. Toro kind of fills out some positional availability that you might be looking for. So we head over to Abraham Toro's Fangraphs here, and we take a look at his clutch rating in 2022. Obviously, small amount of plate appearances and at-bats and stuff, but 1.09, pretty solid. for a player of his caliber, and it's how much better or worse a player does in high leverage situations. A clutch pinch hit could be the difference between making the playoffs and not making the playoffs, with how the Orioles, Blue Jays, and Rays, how we're all super tight there. So Toro could be in there. Now the second player I want to showcase is Jarred Kelenic, a player I hold very near and dear to my heart, and it hurts my soul, truthfully, to see him struggle in the majors. But in Tacoma, the last 30 days, batting .271, OPS 885, 3 homers, 14 ribbies, stolen base, couple doubles. You know, Jarred Kelenic, he's tearing up AAA pitching for the most part. Obviously, we know his 2021, 14 homers, 43 RBIs, 181 average, but we know that September Jarred was integral to the playoff push the Mariners were making. But as we know, Jarred's swing percentage and whiff percentage have stayed pretty bad. And also, before we get into the last guy, I just want to say thank you so much for everyone supporting the channel recently. I'm a second dude. I'm not even like the first dude that you guys heard. I'm a new dude, and thank you for joining us on this journey.
Now this one is a bit strange. This is first baseman Evan White. Now Evan White is coming back from major surgeries. He has missed a ton of time throughout his major league and minor league career. He's still just 26 years old, but he is on the 60-day IL right now. So if Evan White was to come back, they would also have to get rid of somebody on the 40-man roster to put him on it after he comes off the 60-day DL. And this becomes even more interesting because as of the day that I'm recording this, Ty France did leave the game against the Guardians after 2 plays at first base where he may have gotten a bit injured. So whether or not we see Evan White come up in September, or maybe he'll even come up if France has to spend some time on the IL, I would still think that more than likely Carlos Santana would take over first base duties, but having somebody like Evan White over there at first, a defensive whiz, maybe late in the games, not a terrible idea. Evan White this year down at AAA Tacoma has played in 20 games, is only hitting 177, but has a 301 OBP and a 705 OPS. He has connected on 4 home runs in those 20 games and has walked 10 times and struck out 17. Again, I think that Evan White probably just needs more time after missing as much time as he did over the past year or so with all these different injuries, but he is somebody that we could see coming up either to replace Ty France on the roster for a little bit, or maybe as a defensive replacement coming up in September. Another pitcher who is currently on the injured list as we enter our most likely players to be coming up in September, here's where things get a little strange. Again, you can only have 2 players added to your major league roster, and at the most you can carry 14 pitchers. And the Mariners already have 13 pitchers, and as they go up to 28 players, basically at the most you can have is 14 pitchers, 14 position players. Meaning the Mariners would only be able to add 1 pitcher at the most and 1 position player. And more than likely that is the route they're going to go, as Scott Service has said before that he is super annoyed with being limited to only 13 pitchers. So if we're looking at a couple pitchers here, I would have to start with the return of Ryan Borucki. Borucki is currently on the 15-day IL, but he is a left-handed specialist that the Mariners have been using out of their bullpen, and he's been a lot better with Seattle than he was with Toronto. With Seattle, he has a 4.26 ERA with a 1.211 whip. He has a strikeout to walk ratio of 2.17, which isn't that fabulous, and an ERA plus of just 88. But again, the Mariners probably would like to have some sort of lefty specialist out of their pen, and Borucki has already been there, done that this year, so they might want to give him a shot as they go down the stretch and maybe have some left-handed matchups. Just maybe throw some garbage innings. And speaking of left-handed relievers, we are now looking at Matthew Boyd, a pickup the Mariners made at the trade deadline when they acquired him from the San Francisco Giants. The Mercer Island, Washington native is finally home, coming back to Seattle. He is almost 32 years old, and he's also currently on the 60-day IL. Similar to Kurt Casale, the Mariners knew that when they were getting him, and they knew that there was a decent chance that he would come back and make his way up to the major leagues before the season was over. Boyd has been exclusively a starter in the major leagues ever since he broke in 2013. This year down at Tacoma, he has a 3 ERA in 4 games over 6 innings pitched. He's only given up 2 runs, 1 home run. He's struck out 10 and he has walked 0. He has a 15 strikeout per 9 ratio, and there's a decent chance that when he's finally healthy, when September rolls around, the Mariners will finally bring him back up to the major leagues as he returns from injury over the past year or two, and he will finally make it back, even if it is out of a relief role. Having his veteran presence out of the bullpen would probably be a good thing, especially as a lefty specialist. He's been good throughout his career, but it would be nice to have him pitch out of the bullpen and see if he can bring a little bit extra, as his starting numbers don't really jump off the page for you. In 2021, he had a 2.89 ERA in just 78 innings pitched, and he was good for an ERA plus of 112. If he can muster a little bit more out of the bullpen in shorter stints, he would be a very huge asset for the Mariners down the stretch. You know what? Enough about pitchers. Who do we think is coming up from the position player standpoint?
I think the Mariners are going to call up a different left-handed hitting outfielder with a similar set of skills in Taylor Trammell, someone who I think could lift a little bit of the heavy lifting off Jesse Winker and Mitch Haniger in the outfield, in the corners, be a speedy left-handed hitter for the Mariners in September to help them push further into the playoffs. In Tacoma, the last 30 days, 18 games, 71 at-bats, Trammell is batting .338 with a .413, .577, and a .990 slash. He's got 4 home runs, which is more than Jarred Kelenic, by the way, and he's got 5 stolen bags. Now, in 2021, Taylor Trammell did not have a very good year at all. 156 at-bats, ended up hitting 160. So far in 2022, had some injuries, crowded outfield, 81 at-bats, hitting .235. I think he spent enough time in the minors and getting healthy to where we could see a very positive impact from Taylor Trammell. I mean, a 126 OPS plus so far in 2022. I'm going to take it over what Toro and Kelenic have given us in the past. And with how well Trammell has been slashing in the minors in AAA so far, 142 WRC plus, I can only hope that it would translate into a spark plug September call-up from Taylor Trammell and the Seattle Mariners.
In addition of a couple players going into the playoffs, into the final month of the season, that could be really, really big for the Mariners and could make or break their season. If I had to put money on it, I would say the people that are going to be coming up are Taylor Trammell and Matthew Boyd, but I want to hear your guys' thoughts in the comments down below. Who do you think's coming up in the next couple of days for September call-ups? I appreciate you guys checking out this video, and go Mariners!